Hello and welcome to Not Now in Theaters. My name is Will Turntail and I'm a writer and film fan from California. If you haven't listened to this show before, this week's episode is my third film in my ongoing series on John Carpenter. It's Assault on Precinct 13, which is his second feature film. Although, I think you might consider it his first feature, since Dark Star was a student film that got expanded into a full length. We'll tell the story of that movie someday, perhaps. But getting back to Assault on Precinct 13, yeah, this movie is ranked third in the entire John Carpenter catalog by a lot of high-profile critics. You'll have to wait to find out where I would rank it, but I'll just let you know it's a good one. Assault on Precinct 13 is an action thriller film, a siege movie where cops and criminals are forced to unite to defend themselves from an army of gangsters who act quite zombie-like. Some critics even called it the birth of the urban horror genre, which I think is a cool term and totally fits John Carpenter, no doubt, especially with Halloween coming out after this one. I'm excited to dive into why this movie still is worth your time after just about 50 years later, and how it has left behind a lasting legacy in the world of film and beyond. Before we start, a reminder that making films is hard and you have to respect that, so any criticisms I have are meant to be constructive. This review does contain spoilers. I'll give you a warning when they come up as best I can. Okay, let's get into it. Assault on Precinct 13, 1976 review, John Carpenter's action thriller Castle Defense. Fresh off his impressive feature-length debut, Dark Star, John Carpenter was hired by producer J. Stein Kaplan to create a low-budget exploitation film. But this was a sponsored DIY, not a big studio blank check. Armed with a meager, even by 1970 standards, $100,000 budget and complete creative control, the multi-talented Carpenter needed to flex his creative muscles to make this work. He got cracking. Carpenter wrote the final script in just 8 days and scored the film in 3, performed with help from Tommy Lee Wallace. The film was shot in just 20 days, and he picked up the editing duties, along with creative partner Deborah Hill. And he proved resourceful. He cast his neighbor, actor Darwin Jostin, in one of the principal parts. USC film students were recruited as extras. The result? Assault on Precinct 13, an action thriller hybrid of Rio Bravo and Night of the Living Dead. A film that developed a cult following and garnered international attention, Assault on Precinct 13 has been a reference point for contemporary filmmakers like Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino, From Dusk Till Dawn in particular. But nearly 50 years later, is this film still a low-budget classic, or has it become too dated to hold up? Let's find out. Is Assault on Precinct 13 a good movie? The plot of Assault on Precinct 13. Assault on Precinct 13 is a siege movie, and it follows 4 groups of people until they converge for that siege. The film opens in a Los Angeles ghetto, where police officers ambush and kill 6 members of Street Thunder, a local gang. Incensed, Street Thunder leaders White Warlord, Chicano Warlord, Asian Warlord, and Black Warlord swear a blood oath against the police and people of LA. They'll stop at nothing to get revenge. The next day, we follow Highway Patrol Officer Lieutenant Ethan Bishop out to the Anderson Police Precinct. He arrives there and, along with a skeleton crew, including Leigh and Julie, gets ready to oversee the final hours of the precinct as it's about to close permanently. Next, we have a third group, a bus transporting convicts. Among the convicts are Napoleon Wilson and Wells. The bus is forced to stop at Anderson Precinct because Caudell, one of the prisoners, becomes alarmingly sick. Meanwhile, the gangsters drive around in a car, pulling out guns and pondering which citizens of Los Angeles they should shoot. They settle on poor Kathy Lawson, a little girl, and the local ice cream man. Racked with grief and thrown into an angry rage, her father, Mr. Lawson, gets in a firefight with the gangsters and then, overwhelmed by their numbers, has to flee. As Mr. Lawson is chased by members of Street Thunder, he seeks shelter at Anderson Precinct. Then, as the warlords and their Street Thunder gang lay siege to the precinct, hungry to kill Lawson and anyone in the way, the police and convicts must band together in a desperate fight to survive the night. Can they hold out against the overwhelming odds of the Street Thunder gang's assault? And just a note before I take you through the cast here, the name of the character I referred to as Asian Warlord is actually credited as Oriental Warlord. I don't refer to Asian people as Oriental. I think that's a slur. So I took the liberty of changing that name just so you know who gets the credit for that performance. And walking you through the cast. So, White Warlord is played by Frank Doubleday. Chicano Warlord by Gilbert de la Pena. The Asian Warlord by Al Nakuchi. Black Warlord by James Johnson. We've got Lieutenant Ethan Bishop by Austin Stoker. Lay by Lori Zimmer. Julie by Nancy Loomis. Napoleon Wilson is Darwin Jostin. Wells is Tony Burton. Caudell is Peter Frankland. You've got Kim Richards as little girl Kathy Lawson. Peter Bruni as the Ice Cream Man. Martin West as Mr. Lawson. And you can read the rest of the main cast here in the transcript. And if you wanted to see a trailer for Assault on Precinct 13, check out the YouTube link in the links in this episode section of the transcript. If you are new to this podcast, I also include any IMDb screen caps or other links I mentioned in this episode down there. So now let's get into what's so great about Assault on Precinct 13. The first great thing I'm calling amping you up, and this one is worth 2 points. The film opens to simple red title credits on a black background, but Carpenter's atmospheric electronic score rolls in like a pot of coffee on an empty stomach, kicking up the adrenaline. If you could put sound to sweltering LA heat, the wish-wash percussion holds it. A thumping drum taps in heartbeats. Then it hits you with a catchy synth-bass refrain that screams, "Something's about to go down." And echoing strings hold high notes like blurred sirens, carrying a hint of ghostliness. Carpenter is known for his electronic scores, and it seems a default that I say positive things about them when I review one of his films. But this theme is arguably my favorite, and you can actually listen to it right on the John Carpenter YouTube channel, which is linked down in the bottom of the transcript. Next up, we'll call this one Building for the Fight, which adds 4 points. The pacing glides, and the structure is kinetic. The movie starts with a literal bang, characterization comes on the fly, and nothing drags. We follow our 3 main parties, Ethan, the convicts, and the gangsters, over the afternoon until they arrive at the Anderson precinct for that fatal showdown. And the unlikely alliance between convicts and police ups the tension, as the threat to Ethan and the officers could be inside the precinct as much as outside. The development of the siege, rather than rushing into it, allows us to get to know each character well enough to care before the fight, giving us that all-important rooting interest. And now we come to the strong performances, which adds 6 points. Austin Stoker's Ethan Bishop, the leader of both the police and the convict resistance, remains matter-of-fact despite the predicament. You can see his fear, but he doesn't let it get the better of him. Darwin Jostin's Napoleon is an engagingly enigmatic figure. He walks a very thin line between sarcastic fatalism and nobility, a best friend you're not quite sure you can turn your back on. And Lori Zimmer's tough-talking yet vulnerable Lay brings back the Howard Hawksian woman archetype she's based on. She wields a revolver and a dry sense of humor. Together, the trio is like 3 of your favorite cowboys and girls with their backs to the wall, and you know they'll be digging a way out of it. There's banter and camaraderie between them, a trust and quirky relationship forming through the triangle that you can feel. And next we have the gangsters subbing for ghouls, which adds 2 points. In Night of the Living Dead, the zombies were outside trying to scuttle in. In Assault on Precinct 13, it's the Street Thunder Gang. In a deliberate decision by Carpenter, the gangsters are not deeply characterized. They are almost like Night's zombies, hell-bent on wreaking havoc no matter the cost, following their Cholo code and blood oath. It brings a sense of horror to the film, as the men outside don't play by mortal rules. Even the characters marvel at how inhuman and unceasing the gang members are, adding to the tension and upping the stakes. It also helps you understand why they don't just give up and terrorize someone else for a while. And we can't overlook the diverse cast and cloudy moral underpinnings, which adds 2 points. According to Austin Stoker's Wikipedia page, Assault on Precinct 13 is said to be one of the few heroic starring roles for a black actor in an action film in this period, outside of the blaxploitation films. And it's refreshing that this 1976 movie featured black and white cops, black and white convicts, and diverse gangsters. It also blurs the lines, authority not coinciding with morality, criminals not without honor. For example, early in the film, the authoritative warden commits injustice when he whacks Napoleon out of a chair, mistreating his prisoner. But then there is Ethan, who came out of the mean streets of Anderson to become a cop, not a criminal, like many might expect. And the convicts unite with the police when they could betray them. For the time and for an exploitation film, it is neat that Carpenter punched higher. So now let's get into the not as good things about Assault on Precinct 13. First up, this one is the film's combat cycle, which takes away 2 points. When the police and convicts defend the building from the invading thugs, the action can get you going. There's the sequence where Ethan snaps the lock on a lockbox and tosses a shotgun to Napoleon, who whirls and fires at invading gangsters just in time. Still, the fighting doesn't sparkle by today's fight film standards. It's a montage of shotguns blasting at windows, where gangsters peek in through the blinds, almost Home Alone style, or revolver shots taking down hoodlums, storming narrow corridors again and again, like they're respawning. Bullet ballet a la John Woo would be impossible on this budget, but a few more compelling scuffles and close calls would improve things. And without spoiling it, the final showdown is somewhat disappointing. It's a clever last-ditch plan to survive, but it relies on enemies who spent the movie firing silenced automatic weapons, coming at them hand to hand. The street thunder is intense enough to go berserk, but they were tactical too. The film could have explained the lack of guns here. As it is, it just feels like a convenience that lets the heroes off the hook. Next, we'll call this one Let's Play a Kid's Game, which takes away 1 point. There's a task that only Wells and Napoleon can do that might help everyone escape, but it'll be dangerous. To decide who goes, Wells demands they play potatoes rather than flip a coin. A kid's game where you recite a silly rhyme and smack your hands. Whoever gets the last hit as the verse ends loses. Maybe my sense of humor here sucks, but seeing Wells and Napoleon bopping fists like children on a playground threw me out of the movie. It's worth pointing out other audiences have loved this humor, so maybe this is my problem. And now let's talk about how Mr. Lawson does a barrel roll, which takes away a point. And yes, there are some minor spoilers here. Mr. Lawson's shootout with White Warlord makes little sense. After a car chase, Lawson and the Warlords pull to a stop. Perhaps they are unarmed, but 3 Warlords flee the vehicle rather than attack Lawson, which seems out of step with their blood oath. White Warlord pulls out his automatic weapon and opens fire. But Lawson gets the better of White Warlord when he performs his version of a barrel roll. If you don't know it, it's a move in the video game Star Fox that magically dodges laser blasts. Lawson uses the epic evasive maneuver of just slowly ducking back inside the car and re-emerging when the other guy has stopped shooting. It's a clunky sequence. Next up, That Little Girl, which takes away no points. Again, more minor spoilers here. This film is infamous for a scene showing the shooting and killing of character Kathy Lawson, a little girl. It almost got the film an X rating from the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America. In interviews, Carpenter puts killing the character down to being young and stupid. Kathy Lawson's shooting death isn't as shocking today, where we have popular comics like Something is Killing the Children. I've read it and it does what it advertises. But offing the girl was a silly move bound to draw the wrong kind of attention. So adding it all up, Assault on Precinct 13 scores 14 points. On my scale of let's not watch, should I watch, or go watch this movie, that lands it in my go watch territory. Assault on Precinct 13 is a classic action thriller with a kick-ass score. Like Ghosts, gangsters stalk the streets, an amalgamation of our fears of violence and disorder. They lay siege to Anderson Precinct, terrorizing but galvanizing unlikely police and convict allies to fight back. Its action sequences may not match the intensity and choreography of what you'll find now, 50 years later. Still, the movie holds suspense until the end. The setup, performances, and characters are worth your viewing time. It's further proof that filmmaking talent like Carpenter's can overcome budget limitations. The legacy of Assault on Precinct 13. So what's the legacy of Assault on Precinct 13? Well, although the film wasn't a massive box office success, it slowly developed a cult following in Europe. And indeed, being a John Carpenter film and another example of his ability to create a thrilling movie on a low budget, it holds a solid reputation today. As far as siege movies go, you would have to think that any film with that type of structure may just take a look at how Assault uses the structure for reference. And the trope of enemies, such as cops and criminals, having to come together against a common foe is something I've seen many times since this film. Although I would never argue that this is the first film to do so, I don't think it had been done very often before. I think the influence of Carpenter is such that this movie helped popularize that trope. And as far as tropes go, criminals and cops banding together is one I welcome. The film features a score by Carpenter, as many of his movies do, and it remains a popular one. I've seen videos of him playing the main theme live during his concerts. It's pretty awesome. The film's main title? I don't know what I wrote on this script here. The film's main title, which I love because, as a YouTube comment put it once, is the perfect song to walk down any dirty street in any city to, was inspired partially by Lalo Schifrin's score to Dirty Harry and the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin. There was a 1975 vocal iteration of the theme called You Can't Fight It by Kenny Lynch, which was recorded by Trinidad singer Jimmy Chambers and released in the United Kingdom in April 1978. However, it never hit the charts. It's a rare find now. However, the score has influenced hip-hop and electronic artists such as Africa Bambaataa, Tricky, Dead Prez, and Bomb the Bass. An Italo disco version was released in 1986. Then, the 1990 UK rave song Hardcore Uproar by the group Together also incorporated it. So that theme has really gotten around. And having an entirely electronic score was still not quite a big thing there in the 1970s, which gives the film more influential points. As I mentioned, there was a 2005 remake of Assault on Precinct 13, which divides opinion, and I haven't seen it. It stars Ethan Hawke and Lawrence Fishburne, which is certainly a good thing. Other than money, I don't know why you would remake a John Carpenter film though. It gives you a high bar to clear. Actor Charles Cyphers came to the movie through an open casting call, and he's pretty well known in the horror community for his collaborations with John Carpenter. He appeared in Halloween as well as several other of his films. The movie was shot on 35mm Panavision in a 2:39:1 anamorphic aspect ratio, making it Carpenter's first experience with those lenses and cameras. He would go on to use that same anamorphic widescreen setup throughout, if I got it right, the rest of his career. Except for The Ward, his latest movie. He wouldn't have used it on Dark Star either, which came before Assault. If you don't know it, the aspect ratio there compares the width to the height. So the 2.39 for the width for every 1 of the height. Your old TV was done with 4:3, which is why a lot of films were actually physically cut off the edges to fit that format when shown on cable. There's the widescreen TV format of 16:9 or 1.78:1, and then there's the classic theatrical widescreen format, which ranges from 1.85:1. So this format Carpenter favored, the 2:39:1 with the anamorphic lens, optically squeezed the wide image onto the 35mm frame, and then, if I understand it correctly, you use another lens when you project it so that it expands back out again. Using a 2:39:1 anamorphic aspect ratio wasn't all that unique for action movies, epics, or thrillers. However, John Carpenter utilized that format for a low-budget film, which, from my internet research, appears to be a unique feature. It brought class to his lower-budget films, such as Assault on Precinct 13, just as his excellent no-budget movie scores, which he made himself. I can't look at a movie and tell you, oh yeah, that thing is in 185 to 1. That movie over here is in 239 to 1. But I think the strength of the extra wide format does hit you, whether you're distinctly aware of it or not when you watch a Carpenter film. I mentioned this earlier, but it is worth reiterating that Austin Stoker playing the lead as a black man was a notable novelty at the time in a non-blaxploitation film. And I think his being the cop and teaming up with the criminal, who was a white man, was pretty bold at that time. Another odd aspect is that the film is called Assault on Precinct 13. Still, the movie actually takes place in a police station that is Precinct 9, Division 13. Apparently, the distributor made a mistake. The film was initially titled The Anderson Alamo, but was later changed to The Siege. But then in post-production, the distributor threw out Carpenter's title and propped in Assault on Precinct 13. Such a good change. I usually side with directors, writers, or producers over a distributor or studio's choice. Still, in this case, I think the title is significantly better, and the mistake of the 13 in it actually gives it a better ring to it. And there was, as I mentioned, that scene where the gangsters shoot the little girl. That initially earned the film an X rating, so Carpenter, on the advice of his distributor, removed that scene when he submitted it back to the MPAA. However, the distributor allowed him to reinstate it when they sent the movie out. Tricky, huh? It's worth noting that Wikipedia says this is Carpenter's highest rated film on the popular website Rotten Tomatoes as a writer-director, with a 96% critical and 80% audience score. I haven't verified this claim, by the way, but I think it's true. And since John Carpenter was such a fan of director Howard Hawks, and this movie reworks the plot of Rio Bravo, you can see this as a big tip of the hat to the director whose work he loves so much. This is amusing though, because films that followed it were in part taking cues from Assault. The whole second half of Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn is very much influenced by this structure. In fact, the kid in the movie even wears a Precinct 13 t-shirt in it. There's a French movie from 2002 called The Nest, which is a quasi-remake of the movie. Additionally, there's a Tamil, is that how I pronounce it? Film called Kaithi from 2019 that shares the same core plot. Lastly, a fun fact, Michael Myers, the knife-slashing killer in Carpenter's Halloween, is named after Michael Myers of Miracle Films, who purchased the distribution rights to Assault on Precinct 13 in the United Kingdom. No doubt, that decision had so much to do with Carpenter's career taking off. So it's cool that he is immortalized in film history now. Okay, that's all I have for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't seen Assault on Precinct 13, go find a copy or stream it. And if you have watched it before, what do you think? Is it an enjoyable action thriller with a dash of horror? Or has it been too long and the film doesn't do it for you? You can reach out and let me know on Blue Sky using the link in the transcript, or just search for Will Turntail. And if you liked this episode, would you please leave me a review wherever you're listening from? Or if you're listening on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe. New episodes of this podcast come out on Tuesdays. Next week, I'll either take a break from the John Carpenter series by putting out an episode about Paul Verhoeven's insane American debut, Flesh and Blood, or we'll continue to the next Carpenter film, Christine. Flesh and Blood is a medieval times movie that pretty much scared audiences and critics away because it was too honest and savage in its depiction of the Middle Ages. Which is, of course, exactly why the movie grabs me and other audience who have seen it so much now. And Christine is an adaptation of a Stephen King book where a teenage kid who gets picked on a lot gets obsessed with a killer car that empowers him to take revenge on his bullies. It will be a season of John Carpenter on this podcast here in the fall, with a big entire career of John Carpenter episode coming out probably in November. So be sure to tune in next week for my breakdown of one of those two excellent movies. This podcast episode is production copyright of Overegged Media, LLC, located in Sacramento, California. Reference photos linked in the transcript are copyrighted by the Internet Movie Database. This review's factual information was gathered through online sources like Wikipedia, IMDb, or interviews. Misrepresentations and errors are possible, but unintentional. The introduction music, Neon Laser Horizon, by Kevin MacLeod. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. The exit music, And additional music are also by Kevin MacLeod, also licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license. They are Voxel Revolution, Rising Tide Faster, and Aerosol of My Love. Goodbye for now.